In 1946, the British divided the southern region into the western region and the eastern region. Each government was entitled to collect royalties from resources extracted within its area. This changed in 1956, when Shell BP found large petroleum deposits in the eastern region. A commission led by Sir Jeremy Raisman and Ronald Tress determined that resource royalties would now enter a distributable pools account, with the money split between different parts of government, 50% to region of origin, 20% to federal government, 30% to other regions. To ensure continuing influence, the British government promoted unity in the Northern Bloc and secessionist sentiments among and within the two southern regions. The Nigerian government, following independence, promoted discord in the West with the creation of a new Midwestern region in an area with oil potential. The new Constitution of 1946 also proclaimed that the entire property in and control of all mineral oils in, under, or upon any lands in Nigeria and of all rivers, streams, and watercourses throughout Nigeria is and shall be vested in the Crown. The United Kingdom profited significantly from a five-fold rise in Nigerian exports amidst the post-war economic boom. Independence and First Republic. Nigeria gained independence on the 1st of October 1960, and the First Republic came to be on the 1st of October 1963. The first Prime Minister of Nigeria, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, was a Northerner and co-founder of the Northern People's Congress. He formed an alliance with the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons Party, and its popular nationalist leader Nnamdi Azikiwe, who became Governor-General and then President. The Yoruba Aligned Action Group, the third major party, played the opposition role. Workers became increasingly aggrieved by low wages and bad conditions, especially when they compared their lot to the lifestyles of politicians in Lagos. Most wage earners lived in the Lagos area, and many lived in overcrowded, dangerous housing. Labor activity, including strikes, intensified in 1963, culminating in a nationwide general strike in June 1964. Strikers disobeyed an ultimatum to return to work, and at one point were dispersed by riot police. Eventually, they did win wage increases. The strike included people from all ethnic groups. Retired Brigadier General H.M. Nyoku later wrote that the general strike heavily exacerbated tensions between the army and ordinary civilians and put pressure on the army to take action against a government which was widely perceived as corrupt. The 1964 elections, which involved heavy campaigning all year, brought ethnic and regional divisions into focus. Resentment of politicians ran high, and many campaigners feared for their safety while touring the country. The army was repeatedly deployed to TIV division, killing hundreds and arresting thousands of TIV people agitating for self-determination. Widespread reports of fraud tarnished the election's legitimacy. Westerners especially resented the political domination of the Northern People's Congress, many of whose candidates ran unopposed in the election. Violence spread throughout the country, and some began to flee the north and west, some to Dahomey. The apparent domination of the political system by the North and the chaos breaking out across the country motivated elements within the military to consider decisive action. In addition to Shell BP, the British reaped profits from mining and commerce. The British-owned United Africa Company alone controlled 41.3% of all Nigeria's foreign trade. At 516,000 barrels per day, Nigeria had become the 10th biggest oil exporter in the world. Though the Nigeria Regiment had fought for the United Kingdom in both the First and Second World Wars, the Army Nigeria inherited upon independence in 1960 was an internal security force designed and trained to assist the police in putting down challenges to authority rather than to fight a war. The Indian historian Pradeep Barua called the Nigerian Army in 1960 a glorified police force, and even after independence, the Nigerian military retained the role it held under the British in the 1950s. The Nigerian Army did not conduct field training and notably lacked heavy weapons. Before 1948, Nigerians were not allowed to hold officers' commissions, and only in 1948 were certain promising Nigerian recruits allowed to attend Sandhurst for officer training, while at the same time Nigerian NCOs were allowed to become officers if they completed a course in officer training at Mons Hall or Eton Hall in England. Despite the reforms, only an average of 2 Nigerians per year were awarded. Officers' commissions between 1948, 55, and only 7 per year from 1955 to 1960. At the time of independence in 1960, of the 257 officers commanding the Nigeria Regiment, which became the Nigerian Army, only 57 were Nigerians. Using the martial races theory first developed under the Raj in 19th century India, the colonial government had decided that peoples from northern Nigeria, such as the Hausa, Kiv, and Kanuri, were the hard, martial races, whose recruitment was encouraged, while the peoples from southern Nigeria, such as the Igbos and the Yoruba, were viewed as too soft to make for good soldiers, and hence their recruitment was discouraged. As a result, by 1958, men from northern Nigeria made up 62% of the Nigeria Regiment, while men from the south and the west made up only 36%. In 1958, the policy was changed. Henceforward, men from the north would make up only 50% of the soldiers, while men from the southeast and southwest were each to make up 25%. The new policy was retained after independence. The previously favored northerners, whose egos had been stoked by being told by their officers that they were the tough and hardy martial races, greatly resented the change in recruitment policies, all the more as, after independence in 1960, there were opportunities for Nigerian men to serve as officers that had not existed prior to independence. As men from the southeast and southwest were generally much better educated than men from the north, they were much more likely to be promoted to officers in the newly founded Nigerian Army, which provoked further resentment from the northerners. At the same time, as a part of Nigerianization policy, it was government policy to send home the British officers who had been retained after independence, by promoting as many Nigerians as possible until by 1966 there were no more British officers. As part of the Nigerianization policy, educational standards for officers were drastically lowered, with only a high school diploma being necessary for an officer's commission, while at the same time Nigerianization resulted in an extremely youthful officer corps, full of ambitious men who disliked the Sandhurst graduates who served in the high command as blocking further chances for promotion. A group of Igbo officers formed a conspiracy to overthrow the government, seeing the northern prime minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, as allegedly plundering the oil wealth of the southeast. Military coups. On the 15th of January 1966, Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu, Major Emmanuel Ifeajuna, and other junior army officers, mostly majors and captains, attempted a coup d'état. The two major political leaders of the north, the prime minister, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, and the premier of the northern region, Sir Amadou Bello, were killed by Major Nzeogwu. Also murdered was Bello's wife and officers of northern extraction. The president, Sir Nnamdi Azikiwe, an Igbo, was on an extended vacation in the West Indies. He did not return until days after the coup. There was widespread suspicion that the Igbo coup plotters had tipped him and other Igbo leaders off regarding the pending coup. In addition to the killings of the northern political leaders, the premier of the western region, Ladoke Akintola, and Yoruba senior military officers were also killed. This coup of the five majors has been described in some quarters as Nigeria's only revolutionary coup. This was the first coup in the short life of Nigeria's nascent second democracy. Claims of electoral fraud were one of the reasons given by the coup plotters. Besides killing much of Nigeria's elite, the coup also saw much of the leadership of the Nigerian Federal Army killed, with 7 officers holding the rank above colonel killed. Of the 7 officers killed, 4 were northerners, 2 were from the southeast, and 1 was from the Midwest. Only 1 was an Igbo. This coup was, however, not seen as a revolutionary coup by other sections of Nigerians, especially in the northern and western sections, and by later revisionists of Nigerian coups. Some alleged, mostly from the eastern part of Nigeria, that the majors sought to spring Action Group leader Obafemi Awolowo out of jail and make him head of the new government. Their intention was to dismantle the northern-dominated power structure, but their efforts to take power were unsuccessful. Johnson Aguiyi Ironsi, an Igbo and loyalist head of the Nigerian army, suppressed coup operations in the south, and he was declared head of state on the 16th of January after the surrender of the majors. In the end, though, the majors were not in the position to embark on this political goal. While their 15th of January coup succeeded in seizing political control in the north, it failed in the south, especially in the Lagos-Ibadan-Abeokuta military district, where loyalist troops led by Army Commander Johnson Agui Ironsi succeeded in crushing the revolt. Apart from Ifeanyi, who fled the country after the collapse of their coup, the other two January majors and the rest of the military officers involved in the revolt later surrendered to the loyalist high command and were subsequently detained as a federal investigation of the event began.
Agui Ironsi suspended the constitution and dissolved parliament. He abolished the regional confederated form of government and pursued unitary policies favoured by the NCNC, having apparently been influenced by NCNC political philosophy. He, however, appointed Colonel Hassan Katsina, son of Katsina Emir Usman Nagogo, to govern the northern region, indicating some willingness to maintain cooperation with this bloc. He also preferentially released northern politicians from jail, enabling them to plan his forthcoming overthrow. Agui Ironsi rejected a British offer of military support but promised to protect British interests. Ironsi fatally did not bring the failed plotters to trial as required by then military law, and as advised by most northern and western officers, rather, coup plotters were maintained in the military on full pay, and some were even promoted while awaiting trial. The coup, despite its failures, was seen by many as primarily benefiting the Igbo peoples, as the plotters received no repercussions for their actions, and no significant Igbo political leaders were affected. While those that executed the coup were mostly northern, most of the known plotters were Igbo, and the military and political leadership of western and northern regions had been largely bloodily eliminated, while the eastern military political leadership was largely untouched. However, Ironsi, himself an Igbo, was thought to have made numerous attempts to please northerners. The other events that also fueled suspicions of a so-called Igbo conspiracy were the killing of northern leaders and the killing of the Brigadier General Adamulagun's pregnant wife by the coup executioners. Among the Igbo people, reaction to the coup was mixed. Despite the overwhelming contradictions of the coup being executed by mostly northern soldiers, such as John Atom Kapera, later military governor of Benue State, the killing of Igbo soldier Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Unegbe by coup executioners, and Ironsi's termination of an Igbo-led coup, the ease by which Ironsi stopped the coup led to suspicion that the Igbo coup plotters planned all along to pave the way for Ironsi to take the reins of power in Nigeria. Colonel Odumegwu Ojukwu became military governor of the eastern region at this time. On the 24th of May 1966, the military government issued Unification Decree #34, which would have replaced the federation with a more centralized system. The Northern Bloc found this decree intolerable. The Northern Bloc, in the face of provocation from the Eastern media, which repeatedly showed humiliating posters and cartoons of the slain northern politicians, on the night of the 29th of July 1966, northern soldiers at Abeokuta barracks mutinied, thus precipitating a counter-coup, which had already been in the planning stages. Ironsi was on a visit to Ibadan during their mutiny, and there he was killed, along with his host, Adekunle Fajuyi. The counter-coup led to the installation of Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon as Supreme Commander of the Nigerian Armed Forces. Gowon was chosen as a compromise candidate. He was a northerner, a Christian, from a minority tribe, and had a good reputation within the army. It seems that Gowon immediately faced not only a potential standoff with the East, but secession threats from the northern and even the western region. The counter-coup plotters had considered using the opportunity to withdraw from the Federation themselves. Ambassadors from the United Kingdom and the United States, however, urged Gowon to maintain control over the whole country. Gowon followed this plan, repealing the Unification Decree, announcing a return to the federal system. Persecution of Igbo. After the January coup, Igbos in the north were accused of taunting their hosts for the loss of their leaders. A popular example was Celestine UKWWU, a popular Igbo musician, who released a song titled Iyoyu Neba Aqua, Goats Are Crying, apparently mocking the late Ahmadu Bello. These provocations were so pervasive that they warranted the promulgation of Decree 44 of 1966, banning them by the military government. The first president of Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, who was away during the first coup, noted, "Some Igbo elements who were domiciled in northern Nigeria taunted northerners by defaming their leaders through means of records or songs or pictures. They also published pamphlets and postcards, which displayed a peculiar representation of certain northerners, living or dead, in a manner likely to provoke disaffection. From June through October 1966, pogroms in the north killed an estimated 10,000 to 30,000 Igbo, half of them children, and caused more than 1 million to 2 million to flee to the eastern region." The 29th of September 1966 became known as Black Thursday, as it was considered the worst day of the massacres. Ethnomusicologist Charles Keel, who was visiting Nigeria in 1966, recounted, "The pogroms I witnessed in Makurdi, Nigeria, late September 1966, were foreshadowed by months of intensive anti-Igbo and anti-Eastern conversations among TIV, Idoma, Hausa, and other northerners resident in Makurdi, and, fitting a pattern replicated in city after city, the massacres were led by the Nigerian army. Before, during, and after the slaughter, Colonel Gowan could be heard over the radio issuing guarantees of safety to all Easterners, all citizens of Nigeria, but the intent of the soldiers, the only power that counts in Nigeria now or then, was painfully clear." After counting the disemboweled bodies along the Makurdi Road, I was escorted back to the city by soldiers who apologized for the stench and explained politely that they were doing me and the world a great favor by eliminating Igbos. Professor of History Murray Last, who was in Zaria City on the day after the first coup, describes his experience on that day. "And the day after the coup, January 16, 1966, there was initially so much open relief on the ABU campus that it shocked me. It was only later, when I was living within Zaria City at Babandodo, that I encountered the anger at the way Igbo traders and journalists were mocking their Hausa fellow traders in Zaria's Sabongari over the death of their father, and were pushing aside various motor park workers elsewhere, telling the Hausa that the rules had now all changed, and it was the Hausa who were now the underlings in market or motor park. The federal military government also laid the groundwork for the economic blockade of the eastern region, which went into full effect in 1967. Breakaway. The new republic adopted the flag of Biafra, which was unveiled on the 30th of May 1967. The deluge of refugees in eastern Nigeria created a difficult situation. Extensive negotiations took place between Ojukwu, representing eastern Nigeria, and Gowon, representing the Nigerian federal military government. In the Aburi Accord, finally signed at Aburi, Ghana, the parties agreed that a looser Nigerian federation would be implemented. Gowon delayed announcement of the agreement and eventually reneged. The proposed breakup of the east, west, and northern regions following Gowon's military decree. On the 27th of May 1967, Gowon proclaimed the division of Nigeria into 12 states. This decree carved the eastern region in 3 parts: Southeastern State, River State, and East Central State. Now the Igbos, concentrated in the East Central State, would lose control over most of the petroleum located in the other 2 areas. The federal military government immediately placed an embargo on all shipping to and from Biafra, but not on oil tankers. Biafra quickly moved to collect oil royalties from oil companies doing business within its borders. When Shell BP acquiesced to this request at the end of June, the federal government extended its blockade to include oil. The blockade, which most foreign actors accepted, played a decisive role in putting Biafra at a disadvantage from the beginning of the war. Although the very young nation had a chronic shortage of weapons to go to war, it was determined to defend itself. Although there was much sympathy in Europe and elsewhere, only 5 countries, Tanzania, Gabon, Ivory Coast, Zambia, and Haiti, officially recognized the new republic. The United Kingdom supplied heavy weapons and ammunition to the Nigerian side, officially to preserve the multi-ethnic country it had created, but also to preserve the supply of Nigerian oil to the United Kingdom, and to protect the investments of Shell BP. The Biafra side received arms and ammunition from France, even though the French government denied sponsoring Biafra. An article in Paris Match of the 20th of November 1968 claimed that French arms were reaching Biafra through neighbouring countries such as Gabon. The heavy supply of weapons by the United Kingdom was the biggest factor in determining the outcome of the war. Several peace accords were held, with the most notable one held at Aburi, Ghana, the Aburi Accord. There were different accounts of what took place in Aburi. Ojukwu accused the federal government of going back on their promises, while the federal government accused Ojukwu of distortion and half-truths. Ojukwu gained agreement to a confederation for Nigeria, rather than a federation. He was warned by his advisors that Gowon did not understand the difference and would renege upon the agreement. When this happened, Ojukwu regarded it as both a failure by Gowon to keep to the spirit of the Aburi Agreement and a lack of integrity on the side of the Nigerian military government in the negotiations toward a united Nigeria. Gowon's advisors, to the contrary, felt that he had enacted as much as was politically feasible in fulfillment of the spirit of Aburi. The eastern region was very ill-equipped for war, outmanned and outgunned by the Nigerians, but had the advantages of fighting in their homeland, support of most Easterners, determination and use of limited resources. The United Kingdom, which still maintained the highest level of influence over Nigeria's highly valued oil industry through Shell BP, and the Soviet Union supported the Nigerian government, especially by military supplies. The Nigerian army in 1967 was completely unready for war. The Nigerian army had no training or experience of war on the operational level, still being primarily an internal security force. Most Nigerian officers were more concerned with their social lives than military training, spending a disproportionate amount of their time on partying, drinking, hunting, and playing games. Social status in the army was extremely important, and officers devoted an excessive amount of time to ensure their uniforms were always immaculate, while there was a competition to own the most expensive automobiles and homes. The killings and purges perpetuated during the 2 coups of 1966 had killed most of the Sandhurst graduates. By July 1966, all of the officers holding the rank above colonel had been either killed or discharged, while only 5 officers holding the rank of lieutenant colonel were still alive and on duty. Almost all of the junior officers had received their commissions after 1960, and most were